Shadows of the Void. The Viridian Collective had ruled the Orion Arm for 10,000 years. Their bioships traveled between stars like silverfish through cosmic waters. Their quantum networks spanned across hundreds of systems, and their name alone could silence a room of the galaxy's most fearsome warriors. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were cultivators, tending to the galaxy as a gardener tends to plants, deciding which species would flourish and which would be pruned. Commander Zex Era stood on the observation deck of the Terminus Spear, her flagship, as it emerged from fold space at the edge of an unremarkable solar system. Her iridescent scales reflected the light of an average yellow star. Before her, a holographic display showed the third planet, a blue-green marble swirling with white clouds. "Status report," she said, her voice like grinding crystal. Her second, Tevmor, stepped forward. "Preliminary scans complete, Commander. Planet designation Sol 3. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have achieved nuclear capability, basic space travel, and digital information networks. They are at technological phase 4, approximately 300 years behind the threshold for formal contact." Zexera's pupils narrowed to slits. "Yet they've triggered our sensors. Explain." Tevmor's neck frills flattened in deference. "Their technological growth curve is anomalous, Commander. They've progressed from agricultural societies to spaceflight in less than 10,000 years. Our predictive models suggest they will achieve fold space capability within 50 years, not the expected 500. "Impossible," Zex Era hissed. She had overseen the assimilation or neutralization of 17 species, and none had developed so rapidly. "Show me their history." The holographic display shifted, showing a rapid-fire sequence of human development. Stone tools giving way to bronze, then iron, then steel. Steam engines, combustion engines, nuclear power, primitive aircraft evolving into orbital craft. Global communication networks emerging with exponential complexity. "They fight constantly," she observed. "Wars driving innovation." "Yes, Commander. Unlike most species, conflict appears to accelerate their development rather than impede it. They adapt technologies designed for destruction into tools for advancement with remarkable speed." Zexera's tail twitched, the only sign of her unease. The Viridian Collective had a protocol for species like these: observe, evaluate, and, if necessary, neutralize. Dangerous species were like diseases in the galactic body, better excised early before they could spread. "Deploy surveillance drones. I want complete cultural and military assessment within one planetary rotation," she ordered. The surveillance network spread across Earth like an invisible web. Viridian quantum observers, each no larger than a grain of sand, infiltrated human communications, military installations, and government facilities. They watched, they listened, and they transmitted everything back to the Terminus Spear. Zex Era studied the data with growing concern. Humans were not just technologically adaptive. They were unpredictable. Their fiction imagined countless alien civilizations, many hostile. Their military doctrines planned for extraterrestrial threats, despite having no confirmation such threats existed. Most disturbing of all, they showed remarkable resilience, even in their simulated scenarios. Humans fought to the bitter end rather than submit. "They're preparing for us without knowing we exist," she murmured. Then came the complication. A human deep space observatory detected anomalous readings, the quantum wake of Viridian fold space technology. It was a primitive detection, easily dismissible as instrumentation error. But the humans didn't dismiss it. They investigated. They theorized. They began looking more closely at the stars. When the human detection systems locked onto one of the smaller Viridian scout ships, Zex Era made her decision. "The protocol is clear," she announced to her command staff. "This species has detected our presence before formal contact thresholds. They show accelerated development curves consistent with Category 1 threat potential. Their cultural and military doctrines indicate they will not accept subordinate status within the collective. Her officers waited silently. They had seen this before. "Initiate containment protocol," she commanded. "We will not make the mistake we made with the Arctians. This species will not be given time to develop further." The Viridian fleet, hidden behind Jupiter's magnetic field, began to move. 100 bioships, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent, set course for Earth. The humans had built their civilization in the shadow of their own extinction, never knowing how close the scythe had come to falling, until now. On Earth, astronomers at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Chile watched in confusion as Jupiter's radiation readings spiked inexplicably. By the time they realized what they were seeing, the Viridian fleet was already halfway to Earth, and humanity's first interstellar war had begun before they even knew they had an enemy. General Maya Chen was awakened at 3:42 a.m. by a call from the Pentagon. By 3:57, she was in a helicopter bound for the Joint Chiefs' secure bunker. By 4:30, she was staring at satellite images that defied explanation. "We're sure these aren't artifacts." "Equipment malfunctions?" she asked, studying the blurry images of objects moving at impossible speeds through Earth's upper atmosphere. "Negative, General," replied the NASA liaison. "We have confirmation from 3 separate satellite systems and 2 ground-based observatories. These objects are real, they're moving in formation, and they're decelerating into Earth orbit in a manner inconsistent with any known physics." Chen looked around the room at the assembled military and civilian leadership. Some appeared shocked, others skeptical, but all understood the implications. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly, "I believe we are witnessing first contact, and based on their approach vector and formation, I don't think they're coming in peace." Across the globe, similar scenes played out as governments scrambled to respond to the impossible. In Moscow, Beijing, London, and Delhi, military forces went on high alert. Nuclear arsenals were primed. Fighter jets scrambled. And ordinary people, waking to their morning news, learned that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The Viridian attack began with precision and overwhelming force. They didn't target military installations first. They targeted communication. Quantum pulse weapons detonated in the atmosphere, sending electromagnetic shockwaves that crippled power grids and satellite networks across entire continents. Major internet exchange points were destroyed by kinetic strikes, severing the digital nervous system that connected human civilization. Within the first hour, Earth's communications were reduced to shortwave radio and hardened military networks. Civilian populations, suddenly cut off from information, fell into panic and confusion, exactly as the Viridian tactical simulations had predicted. The second wave targeted military response capabilities. Orbital bombardment rods, simple tungsten cylinders accelerated to hypersonic speeds, struck air bases, naval ports, and missile silos with the force of small nuclear weapons, but without the radiation. Human military forces, trained to fight other humans, found themselves facing an enemy that could strike anywhere on the planet with impunity. By the end of the first day, 30% of Earth's military capability had been neutralized, and no human weapon had so much as scratched a Viridian bioship. The invasion was proceeding exactly according to the collective's millennia-old playbook. But then something unexpected happened. The humans didn't surrender. They didn't descend into the paralysis of fear that 16 other species had shown when facing overwhelming technological superiority. Instead, they adapted. When conventional communications failed, they used old technology. Amateur radio operators formed networks, passing messages between military commands. When centralized leadership was cut off, local commanders took initiative, coordinating regional defenses without waiting for orders. When conventional weapons proved ineffective, they improvised. In eastern Ukraine, a university physics department reconfigured a particle accelerator to create a crude but effective electromagnetic pulse weapon that disabled a Viridian ground assault force. In Silicon Valley, Tech companies worked with military contractors to develop software viruses that could infiltrate the quantum-encrypted Viridian communications. Most importantly, humans shared information. Every encounter with the aliens, every observed weakness or tactical pattern, was disseminated through the growing patchwork of emergency communication systems. The resistance wasn't organized in the traditional sense, but it was learning, adapting, and growing stronger by the hour. Zexera watched from her command center as the invasion faltered in 1,000 small ways. Scout ships reported unexpected resistance. Ground forces encountered improvised traps and weapons. The human information network, supposedly crippled, seemed to regenerate through means the Viridians hadn't anticipated. "This is not proceeding according to the simulation," she said coldly. "Explain." Tevmore's analysis was troubling. The humans adapt faster than our models predicted. They're using primitive technologies in creative ways, and their decentralized command structure makes them resistant to our standard protocol. Irrelevant, Zexera dismissed. No prefold species has ever survived containment. These humans are simply taking longer to accept the inevitable. But as the days passed, doubt crept into even Zexera's mind. The Viridians still held overwhelming technological superiority, but the cost of the invasion was growing. Bioships were being damaged by increasingly effective human countermeasures. Ground forces were facing resistance in every urban center. And most concerning, human scientists were beginning to understand Viridian technology, reverse engineering captured equipment with alarming speed. On the 7th day of the invasion, Zexera received the report she had been dreading. Human hackers had penetrated the quantum security of a damaged scout ship, extracting technical data about Viridian bioship vulnerabilities. The information was already spreading through human resistance networks. The garden had grown thorns, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the Viridian collective faced the possibility that they might not be able to prune this particular species into submission. Defiance against the stars. Dr. Eliza Hammond hadn't slept in 3 days. The basement of the University of Chicago's physics building had become a makeshift research lab, fortified with sandbags and powered by emergency generators. Around her, a team of scientists, engineers, and hackers worked frantically, analyzing the data stolen from the downed Viridian scout ship. "It doesn't make sense," she muttered, staring at the holographic model floating above the workbench. "Their technology is organic, almost alive. The ship's hull responds to damage like living tissue." Next to her, Dr. Amir Khan, a biochemist, pointed to a particular molecular structure. "Look here, their tech isn't just biomimetic, it's genuinely biological. These are cellular structures, but engineered at the quantum level." A military liaison, Colonel James Park, leaned in. "What does this mean for us tactically? Can we hurt these things?" Eliza looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but bright with realization. "All living things have immune systems, Colonel, even engineered ones. If these ships are alive, they can get sick." Across the room, a junior researcher dropped his coffee cup. "That's it. Their shields aren't deflecting our weapons. They're absorbing and neutralizing the energy, like an immune response." The insight spread through the room like electricity. If Viridian bioships functioned like living organisms, they would have vulnerabilities that conventional military thinking wouldn't consider. Not weak points to be bombed, but systems to be disrupted, the way a virus disrupts a body. "We need to create something their immune system hasn't seen before," Eliza said. "Something that can bypass their defenses because it doesn't register as a threat until it's too late." The revelation spread from Chicago to other resistance hubs. In labs and workshops across the globe, humans began working on a new kind of weapon, one that would turn the Viridians' greatest strength into a fatal weakness. Above Earth, Zexera faced growing unrest among her command staff. The invasion was taking too long. Resources were being depleted faster than anticipated, and the humans showed no signs of surrendering. "We should withdraw and initiate orbital sterilization," suggested her tactical officer. "These humans are too dangerous for standard containment." Zexera's scales darkened with anger. The collective does not retreat. 10,000 years of protocol will not be abandoned because one primitive species shows unusual resistance. But privately, she was concerned. Orbital sterilization, the systematic destruction of all life on a planet's surface, was a measure of last resort, used only 3 times in Viridian history. It violated the collective's fundamental purpose as cultivators of galactic life. Yet these humans were forcing her to consider it. She decided on one final, overwhelming assault. Gather all forces for a synchronized attack on the remaining human power centers. Break their will to resist once and for all. The order went out, and across Earth, Viridian forces began to consolidate for what they believed would be the final battle. On the ground, humanity prepared for what might be its last stand. In Washington, D.C., the remains of the American government gathered in a hardened bunker beneath the Appalachian Mountains. Similar meetings took place in the remnants of governments worldwide. For the first time in human history, nations set aside all differences in the face of extinction. General Chen, now coordinating what remained of Earth's unified defense forces, addressed the Emergency Global Security Council via a secure, low-bandwidth video link. The alien forces are massing for what intelligence suggests will be an all-out assault, she explained. We believe they're concentrating their biological ships for maximum impact. The Russian representative, his face illuminated by emergency lighting, responded, "Then this is the opportunity we've been waiting for." Dr. Hammond's team has completed the prototype. Chen nodded. The bioweapon is ready. It's been distributed to all remaining military units with delivery capability. The term bioweapon wasn't quite accurate. What Hammond's team had created was more complex. A synthetic organism designed to interface with Viridian biotechnology, rewriting its operational parameters from within. Not a virus in the traditional sense, but a hijacker of the aliens' biological command systems. The question was whether they could deliver it before the Viridians delivered their final blow. The Viridian assault began at dawn. Bioships descended through the atmosphere, their living hulls glowing with accumulated energy. Ground forces, now consolidated into overwhelming strike teams, marched on the remaining centers of human resistance. Zexera watched from orbit, certain that this display of force would finally break the human's will. No species could witness such power and continue to resist. The humans let them come. Fighter jets held their fire. Artillery remained silent. The remaining missile batteries didn't launch. The Viridians interpreted this as submission, perhaps even surrender. They pressed forward, confident in their inevitable victory. Then, when the bioships were committed to low-altitude attack formations, the trap was sprung. Across the globe, in perfect synchronization, human forces launched their counterstrike. But they didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, crop-dusting planes, water cannons, firefighting equipment, and even civilian drones deployed Hammond's creation, a fine mist that settled on the bioships' hulls. The effect wasn't immediate. The bioships continued their attack runs, unleashing devastating energy weapons on human positions. Ground forces pushed forward, expecting minimal resistance. But within 15 minutes, something began to change. The sleek, flowing movements of the bioships became erratic. Their energy weapons misfired or failed to charge. Communication between Viridian units broke down. On the terminus sphere, Zexera watched in confusion as status reports from her fleet turned from confident to chaotic. "What is happening?" she demanded. Tevmor, analyzing the incoming data, replied with horror in his voice. "The humans have created a biological infiltrator. It's interfacing with our ship's neural networks, Commander. They're overriding our command protocols." "Impossible. Our biotechnology is 10,000 years beyond their comprehension." "Apparently not, Commander. They've found a way to speak our ship's language." The truth was both simpler and more ingenious than the Viridians could comprehend. Humans hadn't needed to fully understand Viridian biotechnology. They just needed to understand enough to confuse it. Hammond's creation didn't destroy the bioships. It introduced noise into their systems, like a brain experiencing a seizure. Across Earth, Viridian forces fell into disarray. Bioships crashed or retreated to higher orbits, trying to escape the contamination. Ground forces, cut off from their command network, found themselves surrounded by humans who had been waiting for precisely this moment. What followed was not a battle but a rout. Human forces, using conventional weapons against suddenly vulnerable targets, inflicted devastating damage on the Viridian invasion force. Bioships that had shrugged off nuclear detonations days before were now disabled by simple missiles. Ground troops that had been nearly invincible in their bio-armor now fell to ordinary bullets. In orbit, Zexera faced the unthinkable: defeat. For the first time in recorded Viridian history, a containment operation had failed. Worse, the humans had turned Viridian technology against itself, a development that threatened the collective's military dominance beyond this single planet. She made the only decision her pride would allow. "Prepare for orbital sterilization," she commanded. This planet must not be allowed to threaten the collective. But even this final act of desperation was denied her. The contamination had spread through the fleet's neural network faster than their biological firewalls could contain it. Ship after ship reported system failures, weapons offline, engines unresponsive. The mighty Viridian fleet, which had broken 16 species before humanity, hung in Earth's orbit, paralyzed, blind, and for the first time in 10,000 years, afraid. The breaking dawn. In the ruined streets of London, Captain Sophia Lewis led her platoon through the wreckage of what had once been Canary Wharf. A disabled Viridian bioship lay half-submerged in the Thames, its once gleaming hull now dull and lifeless. Around it, teams of scientists and engineers worked carefully, studying the alien technology that had nearly ended human civilization. 3 weeks had passed since what was now being called the turning point, the day when Hammond's biological countermeasure had crippled the Viridian fleet. In those 3 weeks, humanity had begun the difficult work of rebuilding, while simultaneously preparing for what might come next. Lewis's comm unit crackled. "Captain, we've got movement inside the primary neural chamber. Possible survivor." She tensed. Live Viridians were rare and valuable, sources of information about what waited beyond Earth's atmosphere. "Secure the area. I'm on my way." Inside the cavernous ship, scientists had established a temporary lab surrounded by military barriers. At the center, contained within a transparent quarantine field, was a Viridian officer, scales dull, but eyes alert and wary. Dr. Hammond was already there, studying readings from the containment field. "This one's their equivalent of a lieutenant," she explained. "And unlike the others, it's talking." Lewis approached the field. The Viridian watched her with unmistakable apprehension. Good, she thought. They should know fear. "Ask it about reinforcements," she said. "Are more coming?" Hammond adjusted the translation matrix they'd developed from captured Viridian data. The alien's response came through as synthesized speech. "The collective will not forget this defeat," it said. "You have no concept of the power you have challenged." Lewis leaned closer. "Then why did you lose?" The Viridian's neck frills flattened. "We miscalculated. Your species adapts too quickly. The collective protocol assumes rational behavior, surrender when faced with superior force. You did not surrender. You did not behave rationally." Hammond smiled slightly. "From our perspective, fighting extinction is perfectly rational. You should have accepted cultivation," the Viridian insisted. "The other 16 species did. They understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy." Lewis and Hammond exchanged glances. 16 other species. The implications were staggering, not just for understanding the galaxy's political landscape, but for what it meant about humanity's future. "Tell us about these other species," Hammond said, "and about the collective." In orbital space, the remnants of the Viridian fleet had been corralled into a stable configuration around the moon. Their ships, still infected with Hammond's biological countermeasure, were effectively quarantined, unable to flee, unable to fight, unable even to self-destruct as their commanders had ordered. Aboard the International Space Station, now repurposed as a command center for Earth's unified space defense, General Chen looked at the holographic display showing the positions of the captured Viridian vessels. "How long until we can access their navigation data?" she asked the team of engineers working on a captured Viridian interface. "We're making progress, General," replied the lead engineer. "Their systems are complex, but now that we understand the biological components, we're finding the computational architecture oddly familiar." "Familiar how?" "It's quantum-based, but the programming logic isn't as alien as we expected. It's like they developed along similar computational principles to us, just with biological components instead of silicon." Chen considered this, so we could potentially not just understand their ships, but operate them. Theoretically, yes, given enough time. Time, Chen knew, was the critical factor. If the Viridian prisoner was telling the truth, the collective would eventually send another fleet, one prepared for human tactics. Earth needed to be ready, and that meant understanding and adopting Viridian technology as quickly as possible. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival was rapidly becoming a technological revolution. Across the planet, Viridian biotechnology was being studied, reverse-engineered, and integrated with human systems. The process that might have taken an uncontacted species centuries was happening in months, driven by the existential necessity of preparing for the next invasion. In the UN General Assembly, now meeting in a temporary facility in Geneva after the destruction of New York, representatives from Earth's nations debated the formation of a unified planetary defense force. The old rivalries and conflicts that had defined human history seemed petty in the face of an interstellar threat. "We propose the establishment of the Earth Defense Initiative," announced the Secretary General, "a combined military and scientific organization with contributions from all member states, dedicated to protecting our planet from extraterrestrial threats and advancing humanity's position in the galaxy." The vote was unanimous, an unprecedented moment in human political history. 6 months after the invasion, Earth had changed beyond recognition. Cities were being rebuilt with integrated defense systems. The first human ships incorporating Viridian biotechnology were under construction in orbit. And from the captured fleet, humans had extracted the greatest prize of all: star maps and full space navigation data. The galaxy was no longer an abstract concept. It was a neighborhood, filled with both threats and potential allies. In a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Zexera, former commander of the Viridian invasion fleet, sat across from General Chen and Dr. Hammond. Unlike her subordinates, she had refused to provide information, maintaining the cold arrogance that had characterized the Viridian approach to humanity. "Your containment has failed," Chen said simply. "Your fleet is under our control. Your technology is being adapted for human use. The only question that remains is what happens when the collective sends another fleet." Zexera's scales darkened. "They will not make the same mistakes. They will come prepared for your unconventional tactics." Hammond leaned forward. "But you won't be leading them, will you? Because you failed. The first Viridian commander to lose a containment operation in 10,000 years. A flicker of something, shame, perhaps, crossed the alien's features. "We've studied your communication protocols," Chen continued. "We understand how the collective operates. Centralized authority, rigid hierarchy, absolute adherence to protocol. Your system works well against predictable opponents, but it makes you vulnerable to species like us." "You are still primitives," Zexera hissed. "One victory does not change the galactic order." "Perhaps not," Chen agreed, "but it's a start." She activated a holographic display showing the status of Earth's defense preparations: ships under construction, weapons being tested, full space drive prototypes. "We're not just defending anymore," she explained. "We're preparing to take our place in the galaxy, and we're very interested in meeting these 16 other species you've cultivated." For the first time, genuine alarm showed in Zexera's eyes. You would interfere with the collective's management of lesser species. Hammond smiled coldly. We would offer them a choice, the same choice you never gave humanity. 1 year to the day after the Viridian invasion began, humanity launched its first fold space-capable ship. Built from a hybrid of human and adapted Viridian technology, the UES Defiance represented something unprecedented, a pre-containment species leapfrogging thousands of years of expected development. On its bridge, Captain Lewis took her command chair. Her crew, a multinational team of Earth's finest, prepared for humanity's first intentional voyage beyond the solar system. Navigation. Set course for the Centauri system, she ordered. Let's introduce ourselves to the neighborhood. As the Defiance's fold space drive engaged, creating a quantum corridor through the fabric of space-time, humanity took its first step into a larger universe, not as the conquered, but as conquerors of their own destiny. In the vast council chamber of the Viridian Collective's central world, news of the human ship's launch spread like a virus through the hierarchical command structure. Species that had lived under Viridian dominance for millennia whispered about the humans who had defeated the undefeatable. The rigid order that had defined galactic politics for 10,000 years trembled. For the first time in their long history, the Viridians faced a species that had not only resisted containment, but had turned the encounter into an opportunity for advancement. A species that did not accept its place in the cosmic hierarchy. A species that fought back. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the darkness between stars, the UES Defiance emerged from fold space, its sensors immediately detecting the signs of an inhabited world. On its hull, the flags of Earth's nations had been replaced by a single emblem, a blue-green planet with stars radiating outward like reaching hands. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as supplicants or victims, but as equals, and any empire that ruled through fear would soon learn what the Viridians had discovered at terrible cost. Making humans your enemy was the last mistake an empire would ever make.